Hello my friends, long time no video. Where have I been you ask? Oh Royal, how badly I want to play you. That honorable mention 2 months ago tipped my craving to dig into Persona 5's director's cut over the edge. A tumble into JRPG bliss that lasted upward of 150 hours. So much content, so much pizzazz, so many waifus. Naturally, you'd assume if I were to rank anything it'd be the bosses, but nay I say. My seething disdain for Okumura's bot brigade will be saved for another day. Instead, I'll be ranking my favorite aspect of Royal, the relationships you build with its confidants. The backbone of Joker's expansive skill set, confidants shape your journey through their distinct personalities, quest lines developing that character, how those events bond them to Joker, weaving into the greater narrative, and the perks you receive as a result of your time spent together. I'll be considering all these criteria and more as we shape up our list of best girl. So without further ado, here's my list of Persona 5 Royal's confidants ranked from worst to best. Number 23, Ichiko Oya, the Devil. More like the boredom arcana. Sure, having a reporter in your pocket to twist the news in a positive light for the Phantom Thieves is a plus, but that strategic advantage is all about the value Oya has to offer. A journalist scorned by the antagonist's scorched earth policy, she is relegated to a cynical entertainment tabloid reporter. She manipulates daily gossip hoping to skyrocket her fame, but changes her ways when Joker's altruism makes her feel ashamed. There is a bit more meat in the details, but the long and short of it is a jaded reporter goes from gossip rag to inquisitive riches, finding value not in fame, but reporting on the real truth even if it's not what people want to hear. I'm glad for a change of heart, but it doesn't make her any less dull. Conversing with her is about as unpleasant as her character design. If a disheveled, unfulfilled alcoholic soccer mom is your cup of sake, then perhaps you'll enjoy her ramblings. If they put you to sleep like me, you'll hardly get out of bed for her confidant perks revolving around reducing palace security levels. Avoiding security rises through stealth was about as easy as my choice to fast forward every conversation with her in my second playthrough. Oya commits the cardinal sin of any entertainment medium, being boring. Persona 5 has hundreds of other ways to spend your time, and they're all far more engaging than tipsy talks with this droll dullard. Number 22, Torinosuke Yoshida, the Sun. If you thought Oya had a lot to say about nothing, Yoshida has more to say about everything. A washed-up politician trying to rally the general public into a state of giving a damn, Yoshida asks for your moral support during his speeches after watching you sling beef bowls like a meat maestro. Listen to the old man blabber on while a few narrative tomatoes get thrown at him, throw compliments his way to spit-shine that ketchup off his low self-worth, and eventually he gains some confidence. Watching this transpire teaches you a thing or three about negotiating with shadows, traits that are at least far more valuable than the repulsive reporters. These, alongside some admirable values, give Yoshida enough of an edge to skip out on bottom dishonors. Number 21, Munaisa Ey, the Hanged Arcana. Compared to Yoshida or Oya, Ey is far less of a dull confidant, but hardly absent of issues. Most prominently, his accessibility is awful for an initial playthrough. Requiring near max guts to even begin his questline puts him miles behind everyone else on my priority list. Add in his perks revolving around a slight improvements to your guns, a generally underutilized part of my toolkit, and his perceived value continues to plummet. In Royal, he gets a boost through infinite ammo in the metaverse, but his augments are hardly game changers. As for the man himself, his gruff exterior isn't for show. A former Yakuza who left the game to protect his adopted son, his quest revolves around the complications of his past and familial relationships. You help him with some dark dealings and ultimately resolve complications that would put him and his son in danger, and in exchange solidify Ey as an ally. While his story has a lot more depth than the previous two, it felt far too disconnected from the main game. Yakuza have no real presence in Persona, you barely interact with his son, and Ey's value to the player mostly exists as a pawnbroker, a perk you get without ever embarking on his confidant quest. He may not be quite as dull as the first two, but barriers to entry, an underdeveloped story, and middling perks make him sink near the bottom of the list. Number 20, Yuki Mishima, the Moon. Mishima's perks are undeniably excellent. A permanent boost to combat XP is worth its weight in gold. Unfortunately, that's about all Mishima has to offer unless misguided repetitive ego trips over a website tickle your fancy. After playing an integral and unfortunate role in Kamoshida's abusive reign, I hope Mishima would bounce back in a positive way. He seemingly does by creating a website to boost the Phantom Thieves' popularity, but he proceeds to let his lordship of the domain name turn him into an asshole. Only after multiple lectures from Joker and some IRL bullying does he finally settle down and learn to stand up for himself. That was one positive takeaway, that he does come around and wants to use his powers for good. He learns not to ride on the coattails of others to fluff his own self-worth until he suddenly decides he's gonna write a tell-all book on a group that definitely wants to remain private as his final spark of motivation to end his questline. You can see it from an angle of him spreading the good word to the benefit of all, but I still see a boy vicariously lifting up the actions of others in the hope that people will acknowledge his tertiary participants. That, and boy is he annoying. His perks may be the best so far, but he's arguably the confidant that developed the least over his questline, which is all the worse considering how irksome he is from the start. Number 19, Igor the Fool. I have very little to say about Igor as a confidant. Including him is a formality since he is technically a confidant, but you have very little meaningful interaction with him. He mostly preaches through riddles in those sweet dulcet tones of his. From a narrative perspective, the obfuscation of his true meaning adds a purposeful air of mystery, but when it comes to building a relationship, it offers little value. If anything, the fact that I put our little check-ins above the preceding confidants shows how little I think of their quests. Igor does of course have significant development in the endgame, but that's backloaded and tied too tightly to the main story for me to consider it too heavily in his ranking. Number 18, Haru Okumura, the Empress. Speaking of backloaded with minimal development, that's Haru in a nutshell. At least it was in my first playthrough. Similar to EY, I lacked the lofty kindness stat required to access her questline, and barely scraped through it at the very end of my playthrough. There's nothing inherently wrong with introducing new relationships late in the game, but it is a problem when they lack the substance you've come to expect from the previous examples. Haru likes plants, coffee that tastes like shit, made from shit, and saying thank you in the same exact tone again and again and again. You learn very little about what makes her tick as a person beyond the surface level. She has severe circumstances that give her the opportunity to be vulnerable, like her father being murdered on live television and being sworn to an abusive fiance. She instead takes these things in an unsettling stride and carries on about plants and coffee. Her subdued nature wastes the opportunity those narrative beats offer to develop her character in a big way. It leaves her relationship with Joker feeling superficial, unlike any other party member. Plus, her unique vegetable growing perk is useless by the time she's available because you'll likely be overflowing with more items than you'll ever need. It's not that I dislike Haru, but I felt her potential was sorely untapped, leaving her as my least favorite party confidant. Number 17, Morgana the Magician. In contrast to Haru, you'll learn every minute detail about who Morgana is. It'll be shoved down your throat at every turn whether you're thirsty for pussy or not. Or excuse me, you're not a cat. Or are you? Who cares? Morgana's identity boils down to a mixture of the following: a narrative voice for a silent protagonist to carry dialogue when others aren't around, a disguised tutorial to force you along a set path, a misguided monster that idealizes humans, and a white knight the ladies never asked for. The first is a necessary evil that may have you grow tired of him by a long playthrough's end, especially when you add in the bossy guidance, feline tantrums, and painful pining after Lady On. Ugh. The worst part of the main story features Morgana feeling useless and ditching the party. Hilariously inspired by Ryuji's taunts, something Morgana returns relentlessly before and after. Instead of putting the entire operation at risk for another tantrum, why not just say, hey, I'm not feeling valued since Futaba joined. I'm an important member of the team too, right? Instead, he constantly says, nah, it's nothing. It's clearly not, Morgana. Any of the members certainly would have massaged his ego, but instead he had to make a production out of it. All of these grievances aside, Morgana is undoubtedly useful in the metaverse both for his extensive knowledge of its inner workings and being benched as a permanent team medic between battles. He does mature over the course of the game, especially in Royal, with his bond to Joker feeling more genuine by game's end. I came out of Royal more positive on Morgana than I expected. Still, it's difficult to ignore everything I find irritating about the character, enough to suppress his ranking into the bottom third. Maybe you wish you had a guiding feline in your life to point you in the right direction to brush up your skills. While I can't promise there'll be a cat, today's sponsor Skillshare has everything a creative soul needs to learn new skills or expand your passions. There are thousands of classes on a wide array of topics such as video editing, animation, illustration, creative writing, marketing, and even lifestyle skills. Perhaps you were inspired by Persona 5 stylish art. Danny can get you started in animation through their tutorial showcasing how to sketch character walking cycles. Or maybe you want to emulate Mishima's finer traits and get into web design, Rich's class can give you all the tips and tricks you need to make your very own fan site. Whatever your creative goals may be, Skillshare has valuable courses to help you reach them. For less than $10 a month annually, their community of creators can guide you on the path to meaningful growth in 2021. The first 1,000 of you to use my link in the description get a free premium trial, so hurry on down there. Big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video, and thank you for listening. Number 16, Shinya Oda, The Tower. Now we reach the middle of the pack. Characters I don't feel too strongly about one way or the other, but they have strong perks or personalities that shine a bit brighter than the bottom dwellers. What I like about Shinya is the opportunity to see the positive impact the Phantom Thieves' values can have on their impressionable fans. Or at least when the leader takes a personal interest in a kid in a tough situation. It is rewarding to see him become more friendly by the end of his quest, and I was glad to be able to improve his home situation. In return, he gives some incredible shooting perks that are regularly useful in the metaverse. With great perks and a decent storyline, he's a solid baseline for non-party confidants. Number 15, Caroline and Justine, the Strength Arcana. The twins have unique value as confidants thanks to their differentiated questline. Rather than simply spend time with them, you must deliver personas with specific abilities. In return, their perks give access to powerful benefits within the Velvet Room. It's a clever design choice that encourages the player to experiment with a fusion system, a suggestion you'd be wise to take as it is a large part of defining your combat experience. As for the twins themselves, I enjoy how pronounced the distinctions in their personalities are. The whole ruthless wardens that actually really care about the protagonist's stick is fun, and what their questline reveals about their true nature is intriguing. They don't stand out enough to move much higher, especially since the aforementioned stick arguably overstays its welcome in the optional hangouts Royal offers, but the twins are still well worth a middle spot. Number 14, Jihaya Mifune, the Fortune Arcana. Much like the past few entries, Jihaya has a resoundingly average storyline boosted by some of the best perks in the game, perhaps even the best when talking about confidants. For leading her along a more just path of providing encouraging fortunes to those in need and not swindling them to buy worthless stones for insane prices, you get access to different fortunes. They can increase money earned, sound the powerful fusion alarm, or even boost social skill points earned for a day. Biggest reward though is her confidant telling, allowing you to guarantee your next hangout will advance your relationship. Until that point, it's possible you'll need to spend your limited time hanging out with someone just for the chance that the next time you can advance your relationship. For the small price of 5,000 yen, you can skip this entirely with Chihaya's help. That said, she's not all perk, with charming quips about the present state of the story when visiting her, and a good nature that makes her turnaround heartwarming. Her story may not stand out as much as those to come, but she's one of the most powerful allies in the game for boosting your pocketbook, personas, and social standing. Number 13, Takuto Maruki, the Counselor. I find it difficult to provide Maruki an accurate spot on the list. If I'm valuing him solely for his confidant questline, he might actually vie for a spot toward the bottom. If I ignore how mundane and repetitive your conversations are until the endgame, and consider the value he provides as an antagonist without comically evil motivations, he has a solid argument to rise toward the top. Then taking into account his perks that are extremely powerful passive and combat upgrades, though the combat perks don't proc enough to be considered too overpowered, I end up waffling back and forth on where he goes enough to land him right in the middle. Due to the nature of Royal's Edition on top of a game with a complete story, Maruki's presence feels somewhat ham-fisted. It's clear he'll come into play in a big way eventually, but they're too afraid to put heavy emphasis on it early in order to keep focus on the current crises in the main story. As a result, your conversations with him feel safe and don't advance anything meaningful. He'll spout some exposition about cognitive science that gets slightly deeper as you progress, but anytime it's about to get interesting, he hides behind my research and soon my paper will be done and sends you along your way with some snacks. Sure, there's a payoff eventually, but you wait ages for it, and by that time it has little to do with your confidant relationship. I can at least thank the experience for developing him a lot more than the other antagonists in the game, but the lopsided nature makes it hard to put him any higher than the middle of the road. Number 12, Yusuke Kitagawa, the Emperor. Yusuke has a lot of characteristics I admire. A strong moral code, loyalty to his comrades, an appreciation of the arts, and an eccentric personality that makes him hilarious to interact with. While I appreciate these, the final of those traits is what holds him back from being anything greater. In serious moments where he isn't shouting the lawful good morality at the villain, he's being so strange that his character becomes more comic relief than anything else. When it's hard to take a character seriously, it's difficult to become invested. That said, his background is tragically fascinating, how he chooses to rise above it with Joker's help is admirable, and his perk to paint ability cards is immensely helpful. Yusuke is who he is through and through. I certainly respect it, even if it pulls gravitas away from his character's arc at times. Number 11, Ryuji Sakamoto, the Chariot. Talk about being unapologetically yourself. Ryuji is boisterous to the point of being obnoxious, hot-headed, brash, and impulsive. Though all this is sure to wear on you over the course of the game, these emotions always come from the right place. Ryuji has you and everyone's back through and through, even if you have to deal with incessant shouting along the way. It was nice to see him get closure on his time with the track team, though his quest feels a bit contrived that his personal purpose ends with him dedicating himself all to the Phantom Thieves. I really enjoy the changes they made in Royal, with him showing remorse for his overzealous nature later on, and especially leading the charge on moving forward in the real world toward the end. It's a nice cap off to end his arc. He may be a simple guy with some irritating baggage, but his subtle development is appreciated enough to move him above the average. As we rise above the middling gap in quality, I must bid adieu until part 2. I'm super curious to hear your thoughts on today's Confidants in the comments, and I'll be seeing you again very soon for the top 10. Apologies if my scripting or editing was at all rough. I'm getting the hang of things after my staycation in Persona Heaven. Until then, I want to thank you for watching today, much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.